Richard Miller. This is Never Not Here. Please be welcome to this video and this series that we're starting. We've talked for years about what's the foundation to life, and we've kind of couched it in terms of something that's unseen. And a word that people use for that is the spiritual part of humanity, or of our being. And somehow we feel often that these teachings that we've covered are not as effective as our mind says they could be. And then somehow that's dismissed because we say, well, where the teaching's pointing is not to the mind. And so then any kind of judgmental judgment about the teachings is really not in the parentheses that we're creating. It's not really, it's not allowed, right? It's disallowed. So then whether subtly, just by the way we got into spiritual teaching, or whether it's disallowed on purpose, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter, because what the effect of it is that we don't look into things like effectiveness. And I've been talking about effectiveness in life with Dr. David Parrish, and today we're going to go deeper into it. So welcome, David.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
You know, part of who we are, or who we seem to be, is linguistic, because we have agreements. And we were born maybe without language, but we quickly got into language, and we were born in the vibration of language. And in a way, when we start to use language, we use it as a borrowed concept. In other words, people tell us what we should be doing, from child rearing and on into the school system. We're using somebody else's language that says you could do this, you should do that. It would be good if you do this. Here's how you pass. This will lead you to some great life. And in that way, language has been used in an inauthentic way that has showed us again and again that we're not very powerful with language. And if we really want to look into our own being, something about the authenticity of what we say has to match up with who we are. And I don't know, could that be why many people mistrust their linguistic capabilities or the power of words?
Well, I don't know if that's the case, but I do know that language is the vehicle that we have to use to communicate with one another. And like you say, for the most part, it's been used to perpetuate the past. It's been used to educate us about things in a way where we learn who we are rather than discover who we are. And we learn everything else. So it's kind of, we're born into a world that's already been going on before we got here, and we just get oriented into that world with language. And one of the things that we're discovering now is that it's possible to use language to make distinctions about the inner world, about the interior experience that we have as human beings, that are very powerful distinctions, and distinctions that give us access to the interior experience we have as human beings. And this makes something possible. And what it makes possible is for us to get direct access to the thought processes and the feeling states that occur in the mind, and the perceptual experiences that we have that are, for the most part, if not totally, based on past experience. And the thing about this that makes it so important, as I said to you when we spoke earlier, is that anybody that's watching conversations like this I assume, is interested in having a different kind of experience of life, or being more effective in life, having the relationships work, feeling a quality of life that they haven't yet experienced, realizing something that they consider to be possible that they heard about in terms of the teachings for enlightenment, the teachings for realization, awakening, and so forth and so on. Being more effective in living life in terms of living healthy, and all the other things that people need and want in life. And
Well, let me just add this: that everything you said, like effectiveness, health, new creativity, bringing in the new, finding something that would be good for you and those around you, and being able to effectuate it. All those things would make you feel it in such a way that your anxiety level and your fear level would dissipate or be eased. And so many people say that the spiritual seeker is somebody that's trying to get rid of suffering and anxiety level, and so what we're talking about, creativity, is really a cure for anxiety, but on a very positive note, right? Instead of just numbing out to the anxiety, or somehow sidestepping or skipping over it, it's just really realizing that, hey, we are adequate.
Yeah, people who have an experience, a natural experience of life and a natural experience of themselves, report that they don't suffer from the anxiety that plagues most of humanity. And they also talk about the fact that this anxiety, this fear, which anxiety is fear, that plagues most of humanity, is a function of their having misidentified, being stuck in an identity of themselves that is not actual, being stuck in a so-called personality, or being stuck with an apparatus that's operating in terms of the thought process and their perceptual processes and so forth. And it's understandable that would breed fear, because if you are identified with the body, or you're identified with some idea about yourself, and that body or idea about yourself is threatened by other ideas, or threatened by anything that could harm the body, and then that generalizes, we know about generalized anxiety, that generalizes until my experience has been that people end up with a fear of life itself. And there's really no way to really experience joy in life, or be able to relax, or experience what people report when they experience this natural state, when you have that going on. So I think what we're talking about here, what I'm talking about here, and I think what's important to focus on, is what actually works when it comes to people having an experience occur for them, in which the fear departs, in which they begin to recognize who they actually are. And these are things that are talked about by the teachers that are out there on the so-called circuit today, all the popular non-dualist teachers and all the traditions that they base a lot of what they speak about on. These things are talked about, and the power of now, and all the other buzzwords that are out there.
Right. You said somehow when people get stuck in a limited personality, when they're stuck in limited thought processes, and when they're kind of stuck in a series of perceptions that they think are them, and they become afraid of life itself. And what I think that what's coming to me is that they're actually afraid of language, because most of the personality and the thought perceptions are language based, and they're seeing the limitation that language can carry. And somehow, I think what we're going to say is that limitation is a misuse of language, and that somehow there is another positive way to use language that brings joy and power.
Well, there is, I don't know if they're afraid of language, but I know that the kinds of conversations that people have in their heads and the kind of conversations that people have with one another certainly are an example of people experience life in a context of fear, in terms of people, first of all, identifying with their point of view, people being so identified with the idea of not looking bad and looking good and being in control. I mean, these are some of the things that are factors that determine people's behavior and have a lot to do with the fear that they experience. But what we're finding out now is that language can also be used to create new distinctions about the interior world that people have that allow them to get access to what's going on inside their head, inside their minds, in such a way that they can get rid of some of the barriers that those processes bring up, that get in the way of experiencing what's actually going on, what the reality is of life and what the reality is of who people are. So this is.
We were reading something this morning, and it was saying that your ability to be with uncertainty is, your disability to be with uncertainty is your fear level, in other words, and then that fear level derives an urge to control. So then the uncertainty goes down. So then a part of being free and being free to create is also maybe perhaps finding a joy in uncertainty. Certainly it is aliveness.
Yeah, well, I mean, uncertainty shows up for people who are apprehensive as being a bad thing. People want to be able to predict things. That's why a lot of people get married, even though it doesn't work. But uncertainty actually isn't good or bad. It's just another one of the things that are the way it is in life. Uncertainty simply means that life is unpredictable. Well, that doesn't mean that it means that something bad's going to happen. It could just as well mean that good things are going to happen. So unpredictability or uncertainty in and of itself is neutral. It doesn't mean it takes a human being to give meaning to something. And so if uncertainty is something that a person feels fearful or intimidated by, it's because they're anticipating a future that is threatening. And this goes back to this business of having this context of fear that distorts perceptions and distorts, the reality that distorts reality itself. So people don't see life as life is. People see life as a threatening proposition. And that's something that I think could change if people availed themselves to some of the technology that you and I have been talking about that has to do with one's ability to lead their own life. I mean, leading your own life means that you start to recognize that that you can actively access the processes that go on internally, and you can do work to free yourself from the experience that these processes leave you with in a negative sense. So this is a lot different than just going to a guru and listening to people talk or doing practices. This is actually discovering for yourself that you have an ability to make a difference in the quality of your own life, in the perceptions that you have of life, and in fact, the experience that you have of your own self.
Most people that have awakened, and even that are teaching, have awakened in a way that they, however, happened for them, and it's not through their own teaching that they've awakened. And so then their teaching leaves out something, or it's just a best guess scenario of how they arrived at what happened for them and what their insights are. And I can imagine how exciting it is if you're somehow handed some tools and not handed any kind of necessarily a state of being or a state of feeling. You couldn't be handed a state of being because you're already being, right? So then you're not handed some kind of a piece or a insight, or in other words, you're given the tools to create, to find that for yourself, to find and you were saying that you're given access to your interior processes. So somehow you're looking at them, and you're looking at them by somehow verbalizing them, because you're not just seeing an amorphous energy, you're seeing something that you have words. And so then these tools that you're given, nobody can take them away from you. And so you could go to a guru, feel great, and leave, and you have nothing. You might know his practice or something like that. But what we're talking about is developed and demonstrated in a course that came out of a long line of study and practice, teaching and presenting ideas of human power, not power one over another, but my power over me, my power over my own mind. And so should we talk a little bit about this course, or you introduced it to me? Some of it have known similar things from the past. Our past experiences, maybe we've given up on them because we said it went so far, but then it left us. Should we just say a few things about where this material that we are alluding to?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's important when I speak about this to point out that I'm a psychologist. So I've spent the last 40 years working with people in regard to human behavior. And when you work with people in regard to human behavior, you're really dealing with where the rubber meets the road. Somebody doesn't go to a psychologist that's suffering and want to get inspired. They want their behavior to change. They want their condition to change. They want their situations to change. And so because I'm a psychologist, I've always had a lot of attention on the actual behavior that people had, and the actual difference that got made out of the conversations that we had. And so for me, even though I have been interested in years past in spiritual teaching and a lot of the gurus, and I've read all the books and so forth, I don't think I'm different than most other people in the sense that that stuff hasn't really made the quote-unquote difference in terms of my experiencing what I sense that the people who are teaching are experiencing. And so I've learned a lot about human behavior, and I've done work on myself from the conventional area of psychology and so forth, and work with people as a therapist. And what we're talking about here is that I came across a course that is a course that's designed to create leaders. And it's a course on leadership. But the thing that's unique about this course is that it approaches the business of leadership from the idea that if one goes through this course and learns about what this course has to offer and takes the material from the course and applies it in their own life as they, on the fly, as they live their life, and discovers in their own experience the power of what the material talks about. And it's called ontological. In other words, this is the technology of being. So this course has to do with what it would take to be a leader. And I like the idea of dealing with the idea of being, because that's what people really are interested in. I want to be enlightened. I don't want to just know about enlightenment. I want to be realized. I want to be awake. I want to experience the things that these people talk about that are doing the teaching. And I think the time has come for people to wake up to the fact that for last 5,000 years, that people have been willing to accept the idea that they're inspired, and that people that are doing the teaching are pointing to different practices or various other things. But the fact remains that only a very small people end up experiencing what the teacher is experiencing. I don't think that has to be the case. And I think we're at a point now in our development as human beings and our understanding and the technology that we now have to communicate with one another to really get down to focus on what would it actually take for anyone to have the experience that the gurus and teachers have talked about for thousands of years.
what I've found watching spiritual teachings, uh, and basically what they're finding is that we're more than our words. And when you find that space, it's an important space because you can get totally identified with your words, and your words are limited. And then your words are more limited than someone else's words. And then all of a sudden you're comparing yourself and saying, oh, I'm not good enough, and that could be very, very broad and very vast. And so then it's words that are backing you into these corners, your own thoughts about yourself, in other words, and the way you identify with them. And so when you find that space and you find a space where thinking is not the number one thing going on, it might be in the background, but somehow you find this, let's just call it meditative space, because meditation is one way, people. And I'm not saying that's the only way or even a good way, so then when you start to honor this greater space of what I am and dishonor the thought structures that I carry. And by dishonoring those structures, there's no way you can really look into the power of them. They have the power to make you feel limited. So then, rightly applied, they have another power to actually express yourself. And I think that's where these spiritual teachings, you could even call them a truncated teaching, because they take you to this wonderful place of equanimity, let's call it, where anxiety is not running the show. But then they don't hand you the tools to say, well, where do you go from there? And then you just think so many teachings seem to relate that that's it. We just stay in this space, and then the grace of the creator or creation or somehow this magnificent universe flows through us, and I agree with that, but it flows through us as language and what we can do and how good we can feel. And maybe I would just like to read a little piece of the course and just to give an example of what some of the precepts that it comes up with. And so I'll just read a little part of it that I like.
Yeah, why don't you do that, and then we can elaborate.
Yeah, it's some introductory piece, and I'll just read it here off to the side. Because most of us think that the way we're being and acting is our natural self-expression. So that's all our thoughts, all our limitations, what I can do, what I can't do. However, now here's a big step, but it says, however, natural self-expression is unconstrained freedom to be. And that freedom is limited and distorted by certain ontological constraints that have become a fixed part of the way we wound up being. Now, to me, that's terrific, the way we wound up being. It wasn't really our design. We just fell into being this way from many types of conditioning and many types of constraints and the emotionalism and functionality of our families, and actually the emotionalism and functionality of our nations. And so then right away they're positing something called the way we wound up being. As a result of these constraints on our freedom to be, each of us gets left with idiosyncratic, fixed personal ways of being and acting that allow us to succeed in some situations, but which leave us, at best, getting by in other situations. And unfortunately, totally failing in yet other situations. And that, that's not like really identified with that. It just means I wound up being a certain way, and it gives me three options. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I get by, and sometimes I fail, and is that all I can do? So that's really a terrific opening right there for me.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is if in order to benefit from the work that you're reading from, a person has to be willing. I mean, the place to start is to be willing to be brutally honest. I mean, I don't think that what you just read, I think there's probably very few, if no people, that statement doesn't apply to, in terms of all of us, if we're being honest and realistic, have areas of our life that work and areas of our life that partially work and areas of our life that we fail in. And unfortunately, a lot of those areas of life that don't work and that we fail in have to do with our personal lives, more so than our professional lives, because that's where authenticity matters the most. You can't fool your wife. You can't bullshit the people that you sleep with and you live that close to every day. And that's where people suffer the most, in their close relationships. And even more than that, the place that people suffer the most is in their relationship with themselves. I mean, when you walk around anxious and fearful and suspicious and depressed, that's suffering that exists between you and yourself. That's going on with you, not even in relationship to other people. So I think if someone takes that statement that you just read to heart, and then they look at the idea of how we ended up being, because that refers to the conditioning that we've all been exposed to from birth. Who we learn that we are, how we learn that the world is, how we learn that things work, and obviously that hasn't, gotten us very far, not just in terms of our personal lives, but if you look at the condition the world's in, how humanity continues to repeat the same mistakes, how war has continued to exist, how all of the things that have been destructive to humanity continue to exist, how human beings, one of the facts that exist about human beings, particularly in the most technically advanced countries, is that it's estimated that 80 to 85% of people in this country, for example, suffer from depression or anxiety, clinically diagnosable anxiety or depression. That's a hell of a statement to make about the quality of life that we have as human beings.
What you said was really, really interesting, because when you said, okay, some of these leaders that seem to have it so together and don't even have a good family life, and you might say, well, why would somebody want to have a good public life or a good professional life and allow themselves not to have a good family life? And you'd have to say, well, because something about their image, in other words, something about their authenticity is based on looking good, and they've allowed some part of their life not to look good, and so there's something lacking about authenticity, and probably that's why there's everything else that you said: war and turmoil and misuse of unbridled competition and aggressiveness. All comes from something unauthentic. I mean, why would you allow one part of your life to be in turmoil and then have another part look like it's all at peace? And that's a big part of this course, is using your words and using your actions to be authentic to who you know yourself to be in this moment.
Yeah, authenticity. The definition that I'm using when I talk about the word authenticity is, in simplest terms, to be real. To be the way you actually are is to be authentic. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that who you are and who you think you are, the concept you have of yourself and who it is that you're being in the world, is what got put together over the years of conditioning. And that conditioning is conditioning that comes from a society in which we learn that it's much better to look good, than it is to look bad. It's much better to be right than it is to be wrong. It's always good to be in control. It's a you or me situation, right? It's like you got to look out for yourself. You have to take care of yourself. These are all the kinds of things that go into this conditioning that occurs, the way that you talked about it in terms of how we wound up. And it's understandable that as that all got put together, at some point you are being an identity, and that's not real. So if you're talking about authenticity, most people have no clue who they are. Now that's something that, we don't, it's like death. We don't talk about things like that. If you start to question somebody about who they are, they give you the typical pat answers, I'm a family man, I'm a lawyer, I'm a human being, I'm this, I'm that. But if you really pursue the inquiry, what you get to, because when they give you those answers, you say that, okay, that's what you do. I'm talking about what you are. And if you really pursue the inquiry, you get to a place where a lot of people just get annoyed, like, are you playing games with me? What do you mean by that? Because it gets unsettling to people, because the bottom line is, number one, that most people never really seriously looked at the question. And secondly, they don't know the answer to the question, and nobody wants to look bad. Everybody wants to think they know who they are and have you think that they know who they are. But you see, the problem is, this is really a question of authenticity, because if you don't know who you are, and who you're being is what got put together since you were born so that you could be successful in this world, then who you're being is not authentic. It's inauthentic. It got put together. It's what you can call an act. It's a pretense. And so obviously, if that's the way you're living your life, there's always going to be anxiety, because people have this experience. There's two experiences that people have. One of those experiences is that they have this kind of natural sense that who I'm being is never real. I mean, a natural sense that who I'm being is, who I'm acting like, it's a pretense. It's who I learned how to be. It's how you should be. And so people have that sense.
When you say who I'm acting like, there's too many options, right? And it just becomes clear from what you're saying that when you are authentic, when you find that authenticity, then there's no anxiety about it, because there's no options. You know who you are, and that's it. You don't have to worry, am I doing it right? How can I do Richard Miller right? That's who he is.
That's right. And, one of the things that they say in this course that we're referring to is the path. The path to authenticity is the willingness to acknowledge your inauthenticity. In other words, you tell the truth about it. You tell the truth that if you tell the truth that you don't know who you are, you're on the road. That's the beginning of finding out.
Authentic about your inauthenticity, right?
That's right. That's a very powerful thing to do. And the other thing that you discover, and this is in the realm of this experience of beingness, is that there's this fear that I don't know who I am. There's this fear that I'm not good, that something's wrong with me, that I'm defective. This is a common thing that I've seen with people across the board. And when you really do the work to find out what's actually the case, the freedom that you get to experience is a function of the fact that you discover that you really are no thing, no particular thing. You are what one person has called a clearing, that you are, some people call it just pure consciousness, but you are no particular thing. And that's a real freedom, because then you realize that it's possible for you to create yourself in terms of who you're going to be in the world. Now, it's not possible to create who you really are, because you're already there. That's already a done deal. And
you just create yourself the way you show up in the world, is what you're saying.
That's right. You create yourself the way you show up in the world. And that's a whole different thing than the way you turned out. And that's one of the key aspects of leadership, is to free yourself from the constraints of how you're able to act and how you're able to be, so that you can generate ways of being and acting in the world that are consistent with the results that you're out to produce. That's power.
Yeah, that's really important, And there's so much in this course that, we're just giving an introduction today, so that we're not going to be able to really go into it. But I mean, the fact that everything that's really built, every creative move is built on no thing. Well, that just jives really, really great with spiritual teaching. And it takes it one step farther, as far as I'm concerned. Just to go back a sec I love the concept, the way you turned out, the way you wound up being. It just means that I didn't have really enough input in that, or enough effective input in it. And so then the course goes on to say that we all develop strategies for avoiding failure that are spurned from the way we wound up being. The first half of the strategy is to attempt to avoid failing simply by staying away from situations that don't fit with the way we wound up being. They don't fit with our set repertoire of being and acting. And some of us feel like we have a personality and that we're fixed. And so maybe we've never said we have a set repertoire of being and acting. And then the other half of the strategy is to attempt to succeed by polishing and perfecting our set repertoire of being and acting, or seeking opportunities in which we can succeed by utilizing this set repertoire. And given that living a life, we can't always choose situations that are exactly the way we feel we're able, this strategy doesn't work.
That's correct. I mean, obviously, the only way you can really be consistently effective as a human being living life the way life is to be flexible enough to be able to produce a way of being and acting that's consistent with the situation that you find yourself in. And that's real freedom. That's freedom from the way that you wound up being. And if you don't have that freedom, and by the way, this isn't something that people are conscious of. People consider, one of the things that makes this difficult is many people consider themselves to be their identity. It's not, this conversation wouldn't make sense to somebody like that. What do you mean, that I have an identity? No, that's me. That's who I am. And so people have to first be willing to be open to the possibility that what explains the lack of results they're getting in their life is the fact that their perception of themselves is distorted, and that they don't recognize that, in fact, they are an identity, and that there's a lot more going on than that.
Another part of this course that's really powerful is it starts to bring to light what they call perceptual and functional constraints. So as I understand it, perceptual constraints are things like we only see what we're looking for. So if they tell you if somebody challenges you to find all the what is it, like in kids' puzzles where you find all the flowers in a complicated drawing or something like that, and you're only looking for that, you don't see all the dragons or dinosaurs that are in there, right? In other words, that's a perceptual constraint that's common to us all, whatever it is. And functional constraints are more like how we operate from our conditioning. So functional, it might be how we're used to keeping our word, or how we're used to giving it, or whether we take it seriously. It might be that how we cover ourselves when we think we look bad, and how we treat our authenticity, or we believe that it doesn't mean anything to be authentic. You have to be a chameleon in order to live in this life. It might be that how we hear things, because we have some very strong, what they're calling here, always already listening. The way we listen to things is already filtered, and so these are functional constraints. And it might be that we don't allow our actions to be born out of a passion and an interest and a core value, because we don't really believe in that I'm a being that can have a core value, that I can have a vision, that I can have a mission, that I can be of importance. And so then these are more like functional constraints.
Yeah, it gets scary when you begin to allow yourself to look at what the evidence actually says. When you meet a pickpocket, he meets your pockets before he meets you. That's an example of a perceptual constraint. And, if you live in a context of fear, then what you're on the lookout for is what might be threatening to you. And so your perceptions become a function of what might be threatening to you is what you see, and what might not be threatening to you is what you see. So that's determining, literally determining what you perceive in people, what stands out for you, what you notice in people. The same thing is true with listening. People think that when they listen to someone talk, that they hear what the person's saying. And the reality of it is that that's not the case. When you listen to someone talk, you hear what your mind says they're saying. And when you hear what your mind says they're saying, what they're saying is changed into what you like about it, what you don't. So there's judgments and evaluations about what they're saying. and you think they said what you think they said, which may not be what they said, and you only hear what they say that fits what you already know. Otherwise, you don't understand what they said. So you didn't hear what they said.
Otherwise, you're not really listening. Probably you're preparing your retort. You're preparing. You gloss over that part and just say, "No, I got to tell them this. This is."
Yeah, well, when you're hell bent on being right, that's the way you want to listen. Because if you're hell bent on being right, you're listening so that you can disagree. You're listening so you can see if you can be one up on what somebody's saying. And unfortunately, because of that being the case, it's very difficult to get things through to people, and that's one of the reasons why the way this course works is it's intentionally put together in such a way where they request that what you do in the course is you get what's being said. And that's one of the reasons in the course, by the way, that they present what's being said in the written form in front of the group on a PowerPoint, and then read it off the PowerPoint, so that there's two ways that it's coming into the brain to make it easier for people to get what's literally being said. So the point of the course is that what they want people to do is just to get what's being said and to recognize the difference between your interpretation of that and some of the other ways that it gets modified in a person's listening. And then you can take what's being said and go and look in your life to see it there for yourself, to discover it for yourself, and to put it into application. So in an ontological course, you don't get the result of the course until after the course and you're back in your life. And then you take what you got from the course and put it to the test. And if you put it to the test and it produces results, then it speaks for itself. You don't have to believe anybody. You don't have to worry about whether the course was worth it or not. And so one of the things about the course is going into the course, you have to be willing to accept the possibility that there's a way of learning about something that's different from just getting information about something. There's a way of learning about something where you get material that you can digest in such a way that you can get it as clearly as possible, and then look in your own experience to discover it there for yourself, and then apply it to your life to verify its applicability. That's the difference between this type of course and a course where you just learn things.
I do want to put some stuff on the screen and read it as a PowerPoint and demonstrate what we're talking about when we say that you read it and it's also read aloud, and it comes from both directions. But also I want to say, first I want to say a few things, bullet points, let's say, that might be difficult or scary, right? And for instance, what you need to do to really get this material. And one is to be willing to discover and confront your own inauthenticities, and be willing to tell the truth about those inauthenticities. To be willing to be open and ruthlessly straight about your ways of being and acting. To be open to have your worldview examined and questioned, and to be open to have your frames of reference, your mindsets, relative to leadership, relative to who you are, relative to who the other is, examine and question, and be open to transforming your worldview in those frames of reference. And then what you said before, be willing to take on fully what is presented in the course before determining if it fits you. And then that's some kind of an open listening, and allowing this ontological movement within you to come into being. And you said even after you leave the course is when you really start to get it. And then to be able to participate fully and completely in the course with nothing held back. Of course, respect for the dignity and thoughts and confidentiality of the others that are in the course and the leaders. And then don't wait to have something done for you. Be a full partner in producing value for yourself and for your classmates. So these are some of the things that maybe are a little scary, like you say, whoa, you're going to challenge everything I know about myself and about this world, right? And it sounds like you're tearing me down, right? And somehow in order to examine your life fully and to really look at the foundations of your worldview and your thoughts, is just to realize that you're standing on pure intentions. You're standing on a pillar of pure intention that goes beneath all your mistaken identities. And that's made it possible for me to actually look into my conditioned responses and the way I wound up being.
And the other thing too is that I know what's been a big motivator for me in life is two things. One is that I have a sense of what's possible. I mean, that's what has people go through all of the things they go through in terms of the years that they spend doing practices and following different teachers. They have a sense of what's possible because when they hear people who are experiencing this natural experience of life talk, it speaks to them, it resonates in them. It's because that which the speaker is who they are. So it's kind of like they recognize themselves in the guru. They recognize themselves. The other thing is that what's the point of being so attached to ways of being and ways of acting that haven't worked out very well? It just, that's just not that good idea to do that. And the other thing is that, I think it's very important for people to realize in terms of the risks involved, that if you get into a position where you're questioning the very essence of your worldview and so forth, it's important to realize that you're here. I mean, the thing that you know the most, the thing that's the most obvious to any human being is your own existence. You're here. And to recognize that simply for you to inquire, for you to look and see what's possible, and for you to use your own inherent faculties and your own inherent intelligence to discover what's true in the realm of your own experience is not going to hurt you. The you that's here isn't going to die because you see something. That's just not the threat. So. But the thing that's interesting is it feels threatening to people because of the fact that they're identified with who they think they are. And so, the whole idea of questioning that and looking at other possibilities can bring up threat. But I think it's important for people to realize that unless you do that, you're pretty much stuck. You're pretty much stuck in a reality that is a limited reality. And you have to really look and see, are you willing to have a life that works? Are you willing to discover who you actually are and experience that? And are you willing to discover what's possible for you as a human being and actually living an effective life, no matter how you ended up being, no matter who your parents were, no matter how dysfunctional of a childhood you came from, no matter what kind of trauma you've been through? That's what I've discovered in my work with people, is that regardless of all those things, that the work we're talking about here offers anybody the opportunity to fulfill on the possibility of living an effective life and having your relationships work, finding what your joy in life is, and experiencing life itself to be absolutely satisfying and fulfilling.
So we're on Google Plus Hangout now, and Google Plus Hangout allows us also to put some written material on the screen, and so I wanted to demonstrate that, and this might be a good part of the way that we investigate and delve into this material. So let's see what I can come up with. And now we're talking about a person becomes they're already always listening. And here's the first example. Many people hear what is said to them with "I know" or "I already know," "I know better," already in their listening before almost anything is said to them. It's not that they are thinking "I already know," but who they are is "I already know." The consequences of such an already know, always listening are easy to imagine. The consequences are the same as if you said to someone who was about to say something to you, "I already know. Now, what did you want to say to me?" Or, "I know better. Now, what did you want to say to me?" With such a listening, it's difficult for you to hear anything that might be new for you. Or if what is said, in fact, enhances what you know, it's unlikely that it'll register to you as a contribution. Rather, with an "I know" or "I already know" always already listening, even a contribution, is likely to land for you as a criticism. So then how many of us can really relate to that one?
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, Richard, that the material here, and I've been around for the last 40 years in terms of working with these kinds of things and spiritual teachers and, and all kinds of teachings and so forth. And first of all, this is not spiritual in any way, shape, or form. And secondly, this is the first time in all the years that I've been around, and I'm pretty clear that this is the case, that something this powerful has been made available for free to people. And I believe the team of people that got together and created this course, which is very comprehensive, and really deals with really what is at the heart of the matter in terms of what the mechanics are that cause our lives not to work in terms of the internal mechanisms. They put this work together, and they're out there doing the course around the world to test it out and refine it. But it's clear to me that their intention is to make this free and available to people because it's what's missing in the world. Leadership is missing in the world at the level of individual in terms of people being able to lead their own lives effectively, at the level of organization, and at the level of even at the level of country. I think anybody with their eyes open can see that that's the case. So this is a special opportunity for anybody who recognizes what I've just talked about and recognizes that they're living at the effect of their life rather than being someone who is leading their life, to take this material on and really study it and apply it and find out that it works.
Let's just go a little deeper and pick up another one here. And so then we'll see what this one looks like. So most of us have an already always listening of "it's not my fault" or "I'm not to blame." It's a listening that most of us develop in our childhood. You can see how that would be with your parents looking who did what. While adults, we know that it is possible for us to be in our fault, or that we could be to blame, we are to blame. And while we are not actively thinking it's not our fault or that we're not to blame, who we are, again I say who we are, is "it's not my fault and I'm not to blame." As a consequence, when something goes wrong and there's any discussion about who's to blame, we listen with a filter that "it's not my fault and I'm not to blame." If it starts to look like that it might be us, this listening causes us to generate rationalizations and justifications for what is happening, rather than simply looking at what is happening. And it turns out that we can't escape. If it turns out we can't escape blame, this listening often leaves us upset and with unexpressed feelings of resentment. So then we can track our resentment and just see how it comes from an already always listening of "it's not my fault."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
powerful stuff, right, David?
Yeah, it is powerful because it starts to reveal to people the way the apparatus works that's really running our lives. That really doesn't give us much freedom to be and doesn't give us much freedom to act. And constraints like that really create a tremendous amount of suffering for people. I mean, it's impossible. If I say to you, isn't it obvious to you that if you can't learn, then you can't get better at anything? I mean, that's a pretty, that's a no-brainer, right? But then if I say to you, but you can't learn if you don't make mistakes, that seems pretty obvious too. But isn't it true that most of us as human beings avoid making mistakes because we don't want to look bad? And that when you make mistakes, you get blamed for it. And when you make mistakes, you get punished for it. And when you make mistakes, it's wrong to make mistakes. Those are the kinds of things that we get conditioned with. And so the very thing that's necessary for us to learn is taboo.
Well, you can't learn if you're always right, because then you're always teaching, right? You're not learning.
That's true. That's true. So what happens is people don't learn. And so we live in a condition in which we're all interacting with one another in a very challenging world in which we don't learn anything.
we're talking about perceptual constraints that are just more like how the brain operates, that we only see what we're looking for, so then we could see that filter, and everybody shares that. And then we talked about functional constraints, and one of them was our filter, and what is called here always already listening. And so let's just look at some more always already listenings. And so then I'll just read this one. Identify your always already listening. The question is, what is the always listening that you are? And remember, it says not that you believe you're already always listening. You are the always already listening. See if you can find yourself in any of the following. Okay, number one could be, do I agree or do I disagree with what is being said? Is it right or wrong? Is it true or false? The one we said before, it's not my fault, I'm not to blame, I'm not responsible. And that's your main listening. I know, I already know, I know better. It's so even mundane, because like the example they give you is if you're driving down the street and your passenger says, turn right up here, the first thing you're going to say is, I know, I already know my way around these back streets, don't tell me. But really it's just a contribution and you're taking it as a challenge. Mm-hmm. I'm right and I'm not wrong. That's another already always listening. I am the leader, I'm the boss, I'm in charge, do what I say. You should do this or you're supposed to do that. These are another already always listening is what you're supposed to do. In this organization, this is how things are done. I'm busy, what do you want from me? These are listenings that, what's your point? Get to the point. Then there's others about suspicion. Am I going to like or dislike what's being said? Is it going to make me look good or bad? Or what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? Is this going to be a waste of my time? Or do I believe what's being said? Are you really saying what you're saying? What do you really mean? That's a real suspicious always already listening. Is this going to hurt me? Is this person trying to take advantage of me? Are you telling me the truth? What are you really up to? You can just see kind of a lot of listenings that are active in all of our lives. You're not going to tell me what you're going to do, what to do, are you? You're not bossing me around. There's so many examples of listening that we all can identify with, and we can see the power of this course. That if we have to look at all those, just by saying them, I mean, the jig is up, really.
Yeah, and then somebody who listens to what you're pointing out may say, well, then what the hell do I do? What's possible? And the thing that's amazing is that by distinguishing this already always listening, and by distinguishing the ways that it shows up, you can then become aware of it when it shows up. And rather than have that be what determines what you're attending to, you can choose to attend to what's actually being said. And that's different.
Or what you want to say, by distinguishing, you're saying to put a word to it, to just state the truth of what's going on. And that's a word, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another way of talking about already always listening is that it's inauthentic. It's not what somebody's really saying, and you're not really listening. And so in that sense, it's inauthentic. And the thing to get about
this course is so vast, This course really covers so much, and it also jives with spirituality, because it says you can't create on the residue of an emotional residue or a mental thought process residue, or you can't create on an always already listening. You got to be an authenticity too. It has to do with presence and what's here now, and so this course is so vast. But we're not going to teach it right now. But I think we really excited some people about it, and we were excited. This guy right here got excited, and I don't know. We're gonna run some hangouts, and we're gonna present some of this material, and we're gonna get people's feedback and feel how it's working for their life as we do a 1 or 2 or 3 week interlude and interaction. And what do you think, David? We're really onto something, aren't we?
I say that the things that are really in the way of people having the kind of relationships they want, the kind of experience of life that they want. And even people having the experience that people call realization or awakening or enlightenment can be had spontaneously just by getting the things that are in the way out of the way. And those things happen to be, as far as I can tell, aspects of the process of conditioning and the aspects of the internal mechanistic apparatus that people have in their minds. And so
you're saying that you can save a lot of money, and save a lot of money might mean like you're on the path to fixing your life, or you think that you need to add some new input to get over a few humps. And what I'm saying is that this really, it's not about that at all for me. I can see it working in my life. Just, it's already working in your life, you know. It's not something that you're going to put out there and work. It's already working. And when you get the knack of it and see it, I believe this can propel your life to the stars. And it might be scary, but you can get off the train whenever you want. And what a beautiful series of tools. And I just hope that we've excited some people to participate with us. And that's about all I've got for today. I think we've accomplished a mission accomplished, right?
Here's the most important thing. If you really give a damn about the quality of your life and about your ability to be effective and realize what's possible for you as a human being, then do yourself a favor and take the time and make the effort to look into this material and try it on. If you find out it doesn't work for you, you're not stuck with anything. But my experience has been very clear that you will find out if you make the effort that it does work for you, and it can open up possibilities far beyond what you imagine.
And the one thing I can say is I truly thank Dr. David Parrish for bringing this material to my attention, and I'm really looking forward to our partnership, and looking forward to all the new friends we can make in an actualized and empowered world. So thank you, David.